Just came out to water plants. I got this far with my hose. Then I see feather. It's very interesting. It almost looked, I don't know. It looked gray, and then it looked blue, and then it looks gray again. But that's confirmation that I guess we're supposed to do a message while we water, maybe. I'm gonna put this inside real quick. Maybe it's confirmation. You know, I had a coworker today who was like saying some toxic shit. It was just like a kind of negative worldview. And it almost seemed like every single thing that was brought up today, he leaned into a negative response, or what would be considered have you seen those videos where it's like blah blah blah, stay toxic? That's really what it felt like. And then he looks at me, because I didn't say anything, right? I laughed at the ones that were kind of funny, and the ones that weren't funny, I was just like, whatever. And he was like, do you think I'm like a bad person or something? I'm like, I don't know. Do you think you're a bad person? I mean, maybe a little toxic, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think. People worry about if they're a bad person when they are developing self-awareness but making the wrong choices. When they know that they are choosing something that is either insensitive or hurts people, or whatever the case may be, they know in their head and in their heart already that that's a fucked up response. You know what I mean? And then they question, is that fucked up? Is that messed up of me? And there's two options. You're either looking for validation, you're looking for somebody who you're talking to be like, no, that's not fucked up, I totally understand where you're coming from. And then there's somebody that's going to be like, yeah, bro, that's a little fucked up. So I said, yeah, bro, that's a little fucked up. And he ended it with, well, I don't really care what anybody thinks of me. And I'm like, it's great, but you have to understand your own motivations, right? So I gave him some hypothetical scenarios. In this case, would you act like this or would you act like that? In this scenario, with this backstory, in this context, would you act like this or would you act like that? Would you choose this? Would you choose that? Would you jump in here? Would you do that? And every single time, his response was logical and pragmatic. He might help somebody if he could, but his priority was always going to be whatever made the most sense for him. In a, not necessarily a self-serving way, but a self-preservation kind of way. Certain amount of loyalty, yes, he did have a certain amount of loyalty, but on the whole, it seemed like he would choose himself, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a terrible thing to choose yourself. I would argue that it gets dicey when you're choosing yourself over other people and hurting other people in the process. And I'm not sure I would go as far to say that he would do that. But I don't know him. I actually asked him if he would take the Carl Jung personality test. I'm an INFJ. And I'm always curious to see what other people's results are. And I haven't taken it in a while. People change. Sometimes you get two different results when you take that test two different times. But I do think it's very interesting to see how people land, especially when they're developing that self-awareness, when they're thinking to themselves, is what I'm doing okay? And that seems to be the energy. And I thought about that today, and I thought maybe I shouldn't have said, yeah, maybe that's a little bit toxic. Even though I think it is. I'm not sure he genuinely meant it. I think part of that was humor, part of that was coping mechanism, part of that was true. And I think part of it was just, okay, so the Reckoning Company says Bumblebee. Bumblebee. The Reckoning Company says that bad people can pretend to be good, but good people don't pretend to be bad. And I would agree on the whole, but not entirely. There are some people who are good that present themselves as bad because of fear, because of trauma, because they need to look tough or act tough in order to survive. I had to do that. I had to look scarier than I am in order for people to leave me alone because I was getting bullied. People had to think I was a little crazy just in order to get by. And there was something inside me that I didn't recognize later as being spirit until, recently, the last 2 years, where I understood that Spirit wants people to misunderstand me sometimes. Spirit makes the situation out to look different than it is so that those people get that test. And Spirit gets to see who stands in judgment without all the information and who gives me the benefit of the doubt when it looks a certain kind of way. And I'm supposed to move accordingly. So some people do make themselves out to look worse or be worse when they're really not. It's giving Damon Salvatore, who literally would, him and Klaus, would always take the fall. If something bad happened, they would take credit for it, even if they didn't do it, because it's better to have people fear you. It's better to have people not have expectations of you. It's better to set the bar low. Or it's better to let them misunderstand you or to think about you a certain way so that you can do what you need to do. To let them underestimate you or overestimate you. So I would argue that sometimes good people do, in fact, put on that mask. We've got a cicada shell here. Transformation, unmasking, maybe. Coming out of the cocoon. And I think some of that was there for him. I think that there's a certain amount of testosterone involved there, where men, when they're trying to, especially if they are dealing with somebody that's more like quote-unquote alpha, somebody that's tougher, somebody that's been around the block, somebody that they don't want them to think that they're soft, they will act tougher than they are. They will act harder than they are, colder than they are, in order to present some kind of false narrative. And that's very popular maybe not popular, maybe very common in the male what's the right word? Social politics? I don't know if that's right. But guys do that. They just do. And a lot of those people that act tough and act cruel and act mean aren't. And I thought about whether I did the right thing telling him that I thought that was toxic or not, because I don't think that it's genuinely how he feels. I think that a lot of what he said today was just him blustering and being boisterous. Not that he actually feels that way. And then there was a girl, and I'm not sure why Spirit wants me to do this either, but it comes out in the moment. The first time I met her, she has a very glowing energy. She's very beautiful, and she's very fun and personable and charismatic. And the first time I met her, we had a really good interaction, and she asked me some personal questions. I didn't really have time to ask her much, but she's like an instructor for one of the courses. I don't see her more than once or twice every couple weeks. But I forgot her name on our second interaction, and she's like, she repeated it back to back, like blah 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 blah, and she's like, "You're not gonna forget it now." And I made a joke today, like she came in and I was like, let's call her Samantha, right? It's not actually Samantha, and she got mad, and I was like playing a fun little game. It was not funny to her, and I thought maybe Spirit didn't want me to do that, but those misunderstandings are orchestrated too.